While today ends this year's term, the court agreed to hear one case from North Carolina for next term that could have potentially cataclysmic repercussions. The Washington Post writes, quote, the Supreme Court on Thursday said it will consider what would be a radical change in the way federal elections are conducted, giving state legislatures sole authority to set the rules for contests, even if their actions violated state constitutions and resulted in extreme partisan gerrymandering for congressional seats. Even if their actions violated state constitutions. This case is about North Carolina, but if the conservative justices rule in favor of the Republicans, it could have an outsized impact because Republicans control both houses of state legislatures in 30 states.
That was MSNBC's Ali Velshi with an alarming update about Supreme Court Republicans' latest efforts to weaken democracy and create a permanent GOP majority. After explosive decisions gutting abortion rights, Miranda rights, and even the separation of church and state, the court's conservatives are now targeting another bedrock American principle, our fair elections. Velshi's talking about Moore v. Harper, and it brings to light the latest conservative legal theory threatening to upend the nation. It's called independent state legislature theory, and Republicans want to use it to carve up unfair, gerrymandered election districts around the country. Under independent state legislature theory, Republicans argue that state courts have no power at all to challenge a state's electoral decisions, even if those decisions violate the state constitution. North Carolina Democrats sued their Republican colleagues after the state's corrupt redistricting maps handed 10 of North Carolina's 14 congressional seats to Republicans, even in a state that split roughly 50-50 between Democrats and the GOP. Democrats called that cheating, and Republicans didn't disagree. Instead, they said their reading of the Constitution gives states unlimited power to set election rules, even if those election rules are crooked. In reality, that means Republican legislatures would be able to disadvantage Democrats however they wanted, and no state court could even weigh in to call the plan illegal. If that seems strange given our three equal branches of government, that's because it is, and Republicans have been trying and failing for 20 years to force state legislature theory on Americans. Now that they finally have a 6-3 supermajority, they may have the votes to do it. And it gets even worse. Chief Justice John Roberts has been removing court authority to review election decisions for years. He started by gutting the Voting Rights Act. Later, he claimed there was no federal interest in most state gerrymandering cases. So if the federal courts can't decide whether election maps are fair, and Republicans don't think state courts should either, that leaves no one to protect our election integrity. And this cynical view of the Constitution could become law as soon as next year. Independent state legislature theory isn't new. It first reached the Supreme Court in one of our nation's most controversial opinions, 2000's Bush v. Gore. In that case, the court's conservatives said that Florida state courts were unfairly burdening the legislature by demanding every vote be accurately counted. Just like that, independent legislature theory had the approval of court Republicans, and George W. Bush became president. Now Republicans want to apply that theory to every single election in the country. But that raises another question. If John Roberts has been steadily weakening the ability of the federal courts to engage state election law issues, why did the Supreme Court choose to take this case? The answer is simple. Because with a 6-3 court majority, Republicans no longer have to pay lip service to democracy or the rule of law. They have the power, and the court's fundamental war on our freedoms shows they are no longer afraid to use it to achieve Republican goals. Justices Kavanaugh, Thomas, Alito, and Gorsuch have all described independent state legislature theory as a, quote, important question that the court should decide immediately. Moore v. Harper won't impact this year's midterm elections, but if the court agrees to implement this theory nationwide, it will have a massive effect on the 2024 presidential election. And which Republican hates fair elections more than anyone else? Even a few years ago, it would have been regarded as crazy to think the court would be bold enough to scrap centuries of election law and effectively turn red states into their own Republican-run kingdoms. But that was before Donald Trump filled the court with loyalists who put party advantage over protecting our most precious institution. Now the future of free and fair elections hangs in the balance of a Republican-controlled Supreme Court.